Alrighty, I think we can go ahead and get started. Panelists, if you give a thumbs up so I know that you are ready. I see thumbs and they are up. We're good to go. All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming to today's webinar, What's the Worst That Could Happen? Assessing the Financial Impact of Risk in Community Association Management. My name is Kim Pitsko. I am the Marketing Director for Sync Systems, and I am so proud to moderate today's webinar. Sponsored by Sync Systems and VIVE, Trust But Verify. So let's go ahead and share today's agenda. First, what we're going to cover is we're really going to talk about what is the worst that could happen. We'll discuss risk in the community association management history, provide a brief history and current outlook, and then we're going to discuss some of the top concerns related to risk with respects to vendor liability, insurance, litigation, and cybersecurity, followed by a Q&A. And just for a little bit of context for some housekeeping, yes, this is being recorded. So if you had a colleague who was unable to attend, they'll be able to see the recording afterwards. We'll email it out to everyone later this evening, so be on the lookout for that email. Also, we do have time for Q&A at the end. If we do not get to your question, which you can place in the chat or the Q&A box, we will be sure to address you personally as we following the webinar. And please excuse my voice. This is not COVID, but it's a daycare cold, and I lost my voice over the weekend. And we're just going to go with it. So hopefully it's not as obnoxious as I think it is. So the first thing that I want to do is take a moment to introduce our esteemed panel, and we're going to start with Connor Doyle. So Connor Doyle is the National Sales Director for VIVE, and he has more than 15 years of experience as an executive in the community association management industry, including 10 owning his own management company in Phoenix, Arizona. Connor is a proud professional community association manager with the PCAM and has the highest, is the highest designation in the industry. And he is a member of CAI's national faculty. Connor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, next I'm proud to introduce Elisa Sutman. Elisa is VIVE's Senior Risk Manager, and she has spent more than 20 years in the insurance industry, working for independent insurance agencies, 2 software vendors, and as a private consultant. She is a certified insurance counselor and certified risk manager, and she is a certified instructor, with the National Alliance for Insurance Education and Research. Elisa, thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, everybody.
All right. Next, we are going to bring to the virtual stage Javier Delgado. Javier is a shareholder with Carpenter, Hazelwood, Delgado, and Bolin, an Arizona law firm that specializes in community association management. Javier has experience in assisting boards and associations with the complex legal world they face and has been admitted to the bar in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Javier is a frequent presenter for CAI, both nationally and locally. Javier, thank you so much for being here today.
Kim, thank you, and greetings to my panelists and participants. I look forward to sharing some knowledge with you all this morning.
Often. And last but certainly not least in my world, that is for sure, we have Dawn Randall. So Dawn is Chief Officer of Sync Systems. She has been part of the community association management industry for over 15 years, starting with Sync in year number 1. And we've been around for about 16 years. So there you go. Her passion is driven through the desire to build community and make HOA living a great experience across the United States. Of course, you can follow Dawn on LinkedIn to stay in the know of all things happening at Sync. Dawn, thank you for taking the time with us today.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Kim, for hosting this today.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and talk about literally what is the worst that can happen. So I'm going to bring Connor back to our virtual stage to provide an introduction about risk in the community association management industry.
Yeah, so first of all, good morning, everyone. It's interesting because what I like to say, and as Kim has put up on the screen here, is, just the idea of whether or not you have 10K to spare. No, 10K is not the worst that can happen. And actually, Javier has got some real heaters for us today in terms of a couple of examples that I think get closer to what the actual worst is that could happen for HOAs and management companies. But what I think a lot of companies should really look at instead is that every time they're in a position in which something goes wrong, they should probably count on at least $10,000 being needed to make it go away. And I've owned my own management company, and I have worked with dozens of management companies in my life, and now actually probably hundreds. And the truth is, I don't know too many of them that have 10K lying around just as a downstroke to make a problem go away. Now, what that $10,000 is a combination of a lot of different things. Could be a deductible on your insurance policy, could be the cost of getting a lawyer to represent you. It could be a host of things. It could just be part of a settlement that you end up getting attached to. And I think one of the things that I came to understand as I got more experience in this business was that we were under the impression, and I say we as in terms of management company owners, particularly the small management company owners, that our indemnity clauses really were sort of our shield against liability finding its way to our shores when something went bad with the homeowners association. And that's a really naive view. While indemnity clauses do protect us from quite a bit, the bottom line is that we have to expect that at some point in time, if something goes wrong with an association, we may be called to task since we are in the position of being the professional guides for lay people boards. And, obviously, there are a host of different things that we're in charge of as management company professionals. We are sometimes asked to do far too much. And I actually think that part of today's discussion is really about how management company owners can extricate themselves from certain types of liabilities in an effort to make sure that $10,000 disaster scenario doesn't come up. In the process of discussing this subject with Elisa, who is my colleague at VIVE and has a great deal of experience in the insurance industry, she brought up some stats that actually kind of blew my mind a little bit. So actually, Elisa, I want to kick it over to you really quickly. What did you share with me in terms of some numbers that management company owners should just keep in mind when we're talking about this subject?
Yeah, well, they're scary. And I guess that's what your insurance agent is supposed to do, scare you into protecting yourself, or at least being proactive about preparing for it. But one of the number one dollar amounts for small business claims was reputational harm, $50,000. How many of you have even discussed that with your agent or know if you have coverage? Another one that we were frightened about, but really not surprised, was and this is a Hartford, an article and some data from the Hartford. About 40% of small business owners will sustain a loss within the next 10 years. So it's really not about if you'll have a claim. It's more likely you are going to have a claim. When, how much, what kind, are you covered, all that kind of stuff. So customer slips and falls, I thought was interesting, because I think that one is always in the forefront of your mind, and it's a $20,000 claim on average. So,
and Lisa, one thing, and we don't want to give up too much of our curriculum here in a second, but the one that really got me was that 35% of claims go to a lawsuit, and that is a way higher number than I would have assumed. And certainly Javier is going to be able to talk to this as well. I think that we have this idea that a lot of the stuff that we deal with is small enough that if it goes to insurance, they're just going to settle. The fact that 35% of claims that are being made for GL policies for small businesses are going to lawsuit should really amplify the idea here. Listen, the more expensive your claim gets to take care of, the more expensive your insurance is going to get. And again, when we talk about that $10,000 that's lying around, that number can come from a lot of different places. But at the end of the day, this is what it should be. And as Elisa said, it's not a matter of if, but when. But really what we're here to discuss is not the idea that you could prevent yourself from facing a claim or a lawsuit, but making sure that you're not on the high side of that average. Because obviously, if one is the average every 10 years, there are quite a few people who are suffering a lot. So why don't we segue into sort of the meat of the presentation here? And so we're going to break down this presentation. Kim, I'll just do the talking since I know your voice is a little raspy. We wanted to basically outline 4 areas in which we feel management companies historically have not really thought about as much as we think they should. Now, you're going to say, well, litigation is something that management companies have considered, but I will argue probably not to the degree that you should have. If only for the reason that we discussed, 35% of claims are going to lawsuit. That's a pretty big litigation risk. But also in areas of vendor liability, which is going to be sort of my bailiwick, insurance, which is going to be Elisa's, litigation, which we have Javier here for, and cybersecurity, which Don is going to be able to discuss. What we really want to do is outline the ways in which if you were to give a little extra attention to these areas and perhaps utilize some of the expertise that's available to you in our industry, you can help mitigate the risk of your company facing a liability from these areas. So why don't we get into vendor liability? Basically, what we're talking about with vendor liability is that as a management company, and by the way, if we have some board members here, the same rules apply to you. Part of what management really entails is the idea that you are very rarely the person who is doing the work yourself, and you are instead the facilitator for work being done. So as a management professional, it was my job to link up my clients, the associations that were under my care, with professional vendors who not only would be counted on to do a good job, but part of the professional idea of that vendor is that they have the proper insurance and licensing required in order to both make sure that they're doing the work legally within the state and city in which they're doing it. But more importantly, if something goes wrong, that they have the required coverage necessary to ensure that the association and potentially my management company isn't going to face a loss if something happens. And we must acknowledge that every time someone steps foot on any of the properties that you manage, a liability can take place. Now, that isn't just vendors, that is literally anybody that steps foot on property, which is why we have insurance. We understand that pools and common areas, someone can slip and fall at any point in time. Those are risks that we just have to acknowledge and accept. There are certainly mitigation strategies to try and have those types of accidents lowered. But the main one here is the idea that the people who are coming onto property to do the work, the landscapers, the roofers, the pool technicians, electricians, whomever it might be, the second that they are on your property, if something goes wrong, there is immediately going to be an inquest as to who is responsible. And what we want to make sure is that person is coming on board and they have the required insurance. Now, if that's the problem, the solution is going to be, first of all, that as a management company or as an association, if you're a large scale association or a self-managed one, first of all, you must establish a vendor compliance program. Now, the concept of vendor compliance isn't one that everybody's familiar with, but in short, the idea is that in order for a vendor to do work, they must meet certain standards. You're going to set these standards. It's going to be what your VCP is, and they're going to entail what their insurance requirements are, the type of licensing that they have to require that's usually going to be dictated by the municipalities in which you live in, professional accreditations, ensuring that they're in good standing with the government. All of these things should go into it, because the second that you cut a check to someone, you are taking on some measure of liability for the work that they do or the actions that they take on property. Now, the flip side of this is you can go ahead and say, all right, then we're going to require that every vendor that steps foot on property have a $10 million general liability policy because we want to make sure we never get attached to a liability. Well, that's all fine and good, but the reality is that the vast majority of vendors, except the ones that work in extremely high risk categories, will not be carrying that type of insurance. And so the goal of a vendor compliance program and the goal of companies like VIVE, when Elisa would sit down and help you work on your vendor compliance program, is that we want to really find the sweet spot. We want to maximize that risk transference and have them carry as much insurance as possible without creating such overly burdensome requirements that none of the vendors are actually going to meet that standard and you have no one to clean your pool. Because obviously, at the end of the day, you need people to come out on the property. So that's the first step. The second step, and the one that obviously I recommend, and I'm a little biased on this front, is that you're going to hire a company to carry out that vendor compliance, to enforce the vendor compliance program with a professional manner. Now, I understand that most management companies, my own included, we went through the process of collecting W-9s and COIs when we bring a vendor on. But usually where the program would fail, at least as far as I was willing to acknowledge, is that the second that an insurance policy would expire, I didn't really have the resources to hunt down those renewals. And it's a time-consuming process. I can tell you with authority because that's what our company does. And we will tell you that it gets no easier when you do it for a living. We're just more diligent than most management companies because it's what we're here to do. It's our sole purpose. But bringing on a third party is not only going to allow you to divert resources towards from this activity towards what I would argue your internal resources should always be dedicated to, which is client-facing behavior. The bottom line is, if you in a tough labor market, if you have someone in your management company that you like, that you want to represent your company, that you've trained and you want to keep, the last thing in the world you should have them doing is hunting down COIs. They should be doing client-facing things to drive customer satisfaction so you can keep the clients you have and you can bring more on board. And by allowing us to take that administrative burden, you are freeing up your staff to do what they do best. But in addition, because we have people like Elisa at our disposal, because we have licensed risk management professionals who are actually looking over these policies, they're not just collecting COIs. What VIVE or a company like us is going to do is really ensure, first of all, that those standards are met, that your company and the associations that you're working with are going to be additionally insured in the event of a liability taking place, and that to the best of our abilities and for the vast majority of types of liabilities that might occur, we've created a firewall between you and your associations and the vendor liability or the vendor risk that takes place every time a vendor steps foot on property. So that is one of the big things that we can bring to the table. Is ultimately we just want to be your shield and try and protect you. But obviously the world of insurance goes a little deeper than just the world of vendor liability. So I want to kick it over to Elisa here. So she could just talk about some concerns within the insurance world that pertain specifically to management companies and the companies that serve them. So Elisa, it's your show.
All right. I could talk about insurance for the rest of the day.
That's why we got you.
Well, I guess I picked up what I think is a hot topic, and that is the merger and acquisitions of insurance agencies. And I don't know if you've experienced this yet or have even noticed with your vendors, but we're seeing it a lot. And they actually mergers and acquisitions, and these are what are reported. So really, it's probably just the big shops. It's not every merger or acquisition, but they were up 30% last year. You got boomers retiring with no perpetuation plan or succession plan. And quite frankly, they just are ready to retire. So it's a natural thing that has always occurred, but I think because of the generational age that's part of why it's up. And it's a good thing for agencies. It's a good way to grow, to complement organic growth. So I could talk about why forever. I won't do that. So what does this mean for you? You may think that if this happens, if your agent or, and your agency that you use gets bought up by somebody else, you might think nothing will change. I promise you, something will change. Probably everything will change. Your carrier could change. Your contact could change. They don't always, they promise everything will stay the same, but they don't always keep all the same staff. And so your trusted advisor, your salesperson that you've, I hope, developed a relationship with may not even be with the company anymore or may not be in the same role. So it's frightening to me for customers and insureds, because you're probably just going to go with the flow. You don't know insurance. That's why you had somebody that you know and trust. And so I want you to be really careful about that. And I want you to figure out who you're going to be dealing with, who your contact is. Do they even know your industry, let alone your particular business and its risks? Quite frankly, if you're a smaller company, do they even care? You may need to shop for someone new. And so I would encourage you to do that, and to do it often if you're able to. If you can't establish that trusted relationship, it's always a good idea to have a third-party risk manager review your entire portfolio, because they have no skin in the game. They're not getting a commission. They're not getting a reward for placing new business with some particular carrier. And they really have, are unbiased professionals that can really help you determine, what am I going to self-insure? What do I think, how am I going to prepare for this? How much insurance do I need? And they're all over the place. It's not hard to find one, but I do highly recommend that. If your carrier changes on your policy, don't assume all the coverages are the same. Make someone sit down with you and go through it and make sure that you have what you need. I was part of a merger and an acquisition, and we lost one of our markets because the acquisition had a very competitive market that offered the same product. So we lost that contract and had to roll that book. Well, they're just not all the same. The products for the insurance carriers, they may be very similar, but they're just not all the same. And, bottom line, get somebody that knows your business. Okay, that knows what your exposures are, that can provide some kind of personalized interaction with you, not just a phone call to determine what your risks are in your business. So don't resort to online cheapies. Okay, those we can offer you small business coverage for starting at $29 a month. You're going to get what you pay for if you do that. So I really just the gist of it is just, don't assume same old. And if you don't have somebody that you really trust, that you really think is, qualified, knows insurance, knows your business, shop around. Get somebody who does. There are plenty of hungry agents out there ready to write new business.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
It's so interesting because you brought up the mergers and acquisitions thing, which is really something that we're constantly talking about in the management industry these days. As we know, there's a huge spree right now in terms of companies being purchased, and we're often thinking about the consequences of those types of mergers. But it would have never occurred to me. Obviously, the same capital forces that are causing all the mergers and acquisitions to take place in the management industry is also going to be taking place in the insurance industry. So that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And thank you so much for bringing that up to me and everybody else.
My pleasure.
So since we're here to talk about what's the worst that could happen, my good friend Javier Delgado brought to me in the process of working out this presentation a couple of scenarios that honestly put chills in my spine, just considering how easy it is for these scenarios to take place with a management company. It could have been me. And what we definitely want to make sure is that it's never anybody on this call. So Javier, why don't you put a little fear of God in everybody this morning or this early afternoon?
Well, Connor, here's the deal. We all watch TV, or probably most of us do, and a lot of these late night talk shows, they have like top 10 lists. And here in the legal world, we have top 10 lists as well. They're called top 10 jury verdicts. And this is a list neither you nor your management company wants to make. So I'm going to talk to you about one of these cases. It's out of these are both from the Sun Belt, because I happen to practice out of the Sun Belt, though I'm familiar with most of our country. And our first case is out of the Las Vegas, Nevada area. It is summertime, and a lot of us on the Zoom have kids, and they play out in playgrounds just like this. But imagine for those of us who are people of a certain age, I'm talking about myself, my generation, Gen X and older, but there are older style playgrounds out there as well. Those old A-frame style playgrounds. There is one of these A-frame style playgrounds. There's a 15-year-old that's sitting, he's swinging back and forth, texting, because of course, that's what kids do nowadays. They don't play on the playground. Why would they? They text. He hears a sound, he looks up, and boom, a 42-pound crossbeam hits him in the head, crushes his skull, and unfortunately, he suffers a traumatic brain injury. So, of course, his family brought a lawsuit against the association. And it turned out through because they had a jury trial. And some of you in the Vegas area are familiar with this. And some of you from around the country may have heard this story as well. It's the story of the playground swing set that failed not once, twice, three, 4 times. So it fell 3 times before. No one was hurt. It was replaced. The 3rd time, the manufacturer comes back and says, hey, you've got a problem here. I think you need a maintenance plan. The board blew it off thinking, oh, you're pulling on our leg. We don't need to spend money on that kind of stuff. Well, during the jury trial, the jury deemed it to be unreasonable for them to continue using the same design from the same manufacturer. The jury found that the HOA was on notice, knowing that they had a problem here, and the fact that they rejected this monthly maintenance plan, which was, pretty cheap. It worked out to about 50 cents per lot owner. None of these were helpful facts. The jury entered a $20 million verdict. And so, I'm not an insurance expert, but I see lots of insurance policies. I represent thousands of associations through my firm, and I can tell you, I don't know of a single association out there that has a $20 million policy. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. In this particular case, $2 million policy. So the concern here is there are situations that can arise where a jury can deem that the situation was so bad that they can enter awards that far exceed by several multiples the amount of available insurance. And in fact, if you were to do the math, it worked out to anywhere between the numbers were $67,000 to maybe even $99,000 per lot. Different state laws out there regarding how all of those things work, but a major concern for associations, Trump. So maybe let's go to worst case scenario 2. This was out of New Mexico, and of course there have been lots of these cases involving condominiums. Of course, we're all unfortunately familiar with the Surfside tragedy out there that happened last year, where close to 100 people lost their lives. This involves a father of 3 who was living in a condominium. By all reports, it was a crime and drug-ridden complex. The reports talk about how drug paraphernalia, people were passed out, supposedly in the area. They had over time adopted something called a crime-free lease addendum, something that was actually arose in my neck of the woods and has taken on a national approach. It's one of those deals where apartment complexes basically agree to run background checks and check the renter's background to make sure they're not renting to someone who's dangerous with a criminal history. Well, this condominium said, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And they did do it for a while. But as things happen, they just stopped doing it for a bit, sort of forgot about it. Some people moved in who did unfortunately have a dark past. There was a fight one night. Turned out that someone came to visit this person who had a criminal background. They were trying to buy drugs, or there was some sort of like alleged drug deal that went bad. Shots are fired. There's a commotion. The dad looks through the people. He's shot 3 times in front of his young family. He had 3 kids. The jury came back because there was a wrongful death lawsuit. A $12 million judgment was entered. And here's the shocking thing. I mean, it's horrible that this happened, but from an industry perspective, the shocking thing was that the jury only deemed the unknown shooter 10% liable for the claims here. And the HOA 25% liable. And you know who was left holding the bag? The management company, 45%. $3.9 million judgment. In fact, I was looking around to see if there had been anything else around there. But here's the deal. Associations, have a duty to enforce their documents, no matter the jurisdiction. And of course, the risk is that if a management company is dealing with a tough situation, and if they don't do everything perfectly, they're hoping that they can rely on, the contract that's there to protect them. A lot of these contracts have indemnity clauses, but in this particular case, the jury came back and said, we actually find the management company to be the #1 most culpable entity. So a lot of tough cases out there, a lot of big jury awards out there, and that's why we have insurance. That's why we need to check on how we can limit our liability. Back to you, Connor and Kim.
Yeah, sort of one, and I don't know if you guys could tell, Javier and I have presented together before. And one common theme that comes up, most of our presentations have been to, managers or people local in Arizona. But it's something I can't stress enough, and I don't want to overgeneralize. Obviously, the Arizona market isn't representative of everything that we see here. But we have a lot of stubborn boards in this world. You think about the board that declined to have $150 a month. To try and prevent more playground accidents from happening after 3 had already taken place. We see this a lot, and I hear this a lot when I'm at CAI National, like I was a couple of weeks ago, and you hear about the situations that management companies and managers find themselves getting dragged into. It is absolutely essential as leadership of management companies that we start changing the culture. First, it starts with how we train our managers, that they have to have a spidey sense for when things are going wrong, and immediately ring the bell, bring leadership, bring you into play, get an attorney involved as quickly as possible. Management companies can try and do a lot to indemnify themselves, whether it's through contractual language or just, CYA, making sure it's in the minutes that you said that they shouldn't do this. But as that second worst case scenario shows, a jury may just decide that it doesn't matter what all of your CYA efforts were, that you were still responsible. And what I like to tell people, I started in the financial side of things with management companies, and the way that we have to look at things is that if you cut a check to a vendor, you are on the hook for whatever that vendor does, or you should at least look at it that way. So a big part of this message is that we can't just sit back and say, well, our boards made that decision, it wasn't us. As has been proven, in certain situations, and Surfside's one of those, there are situations that could get so bad that it really doesn't matter what's in the contract. That's going to be adjudicated by the courts, and it may not end up in a way that you like. The final part of our presentation here, and one that I'm really excited for, because I really don't know that, I think every one of us have heard about cybersecurity or have been told by our insurance agents, hopefully, that this is something that we need to start contemplating as coverage for our businesses. But I don't think that we've really come to grips with the liability that's in place as management professionals and all the data that we store. And certainly, I have experience with sync management or with sync systems. I know that information security is the bedrock of what they do. So I'm really excited to hear what Don Randall has to say about the measures that management companies should put in place in terms of cybersecurity, and hopefully a little bit about how sync can help you with that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Connor. And thank you so much, Elisa and Javier. I've learned a ton this afternoon from you both, and from you too, Connor. This has been really good. So cybersecurity, Sync is obsessed with cybersecurity. It has become a growing concern across the world, but especially in the HOA space, exactly because of what Connor just said, because of all the data that we are responsible for with the homeowners. Around the world, cybersecurity costs over $6 trillion a year. And it has caused so many different issues. And you think of the pipeline that happened, what was that, a couple of years, the gas pipeline that happened a couple of years ago. Recently, Lincoln College, it's a HBCU college over in Illinois. They recently had to shut their college down due to financial difficulties from COVID, but also mainly because of they had a cybersecurity issue. They had data that was leaked, and then they were not able to have applicants apply, and they weren't able to properly budget to determine how many people they were going to have on campus, et cetera, and things like that. So it caused them to have to shut that college down. And it had been around since the 1830s. It survived 2 world wars and the Spanish influenza pandemic. So that just shows you how cybersecurity can really, unfortunately, negatively affect your business. The biggest part with this, of course, is the homeowners' data, but also your association's data. You've got bank accounts, tax IDs, all different things like that, for both your homeowners and your associations. All of that could lead to a major hit to your organization. And just like Alyssa was talking a little bit earlier about the insurance, there are cybersecurity insurance policies available, but it's really important that you work with your agents to make sure that you are covered properly for that. So what's the solution to this? We have a number of different ideas, suggestions that we'd like to share with you. First and most important, and our CTO, Peter Yang, is again obsessed with this, is training your employees on security issues. We get emails, I don't know, every 2 or 3 weeks. It's called we do know before training. And it's training videos that teach us how we can spot phishing emails, how we can, whether or not we should respond to sketchy requests, how to even recognize whether or not a request is sketchy or not. And then what to do when you see anything that might be sketchy or anything that might be a phishing email. The phishing emails are one of the biggest liabilities that you have with your employees. It just takes one person a second to click on a link and it could totally mess you up. On our website, we have an insecurity white paper, and that will guide you through the trainings that you can easily add to your staff meetings. So we have that information available for you. It's been great for us internally. It allows us to track who does the videos. It also will send out fake phishing emails to make sure that your employees are really checking the emails and make sure that you're good to go with all of your staff. And so it's been really good. Another big thing is for any software that you are using where you are capturing your homeowner data and your association data and even your management company data, you want to make sure that that software has been verified for its security. There's different types of programs that will verify software, especially SaaS software. Sync has been verified by one of the top leaders in the industry. It's called Veracode, and we are the only company in this industry that has been Veracode verified for management software and accounting and property management. Last but not least, the data that you have in your system. I can only speak for Sync right now. So, you know, in Sync, if you're a Sync customer, or even if you're not using Sync, you're using another provider for your property management and your accounting. You've got bank account information in there. You have homeowners information, phone numbers, email addresses, addresses. And sometimes if you're processing ACH for homeowners, their banking information as well. It's really important that your security experts at your company look to see who has access to that data. You don't want everybody in your company to have access to all of that data. You really want to take a look at it and say, hey, you know what? I have a group, you know, maybe it's your accounts payable team. They probably don't need access to the homeowner data because they're mainly just dealing with the invoices that are coming into the associations. You know, Kim has said as we do these, you know, spoiler alert when we talk about this, really the minimum number of people that are necessary should have access to that sensitive data. And so we really advise that you take a look at that and understand who in your organization has access to that information, especially the bank account information.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Kim, I'm going to kick it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just going to kick it back to you and Kim.
Yeah, you know, you used a word there that starts with a T that always gets me a little scared when we start talking about trillions. And I do think that we've all, I think, kind of just taken on this idea that we're going to constantly try and get scammed, right? Like our phones have become practically unusable because of the number of, you know, spam texts and calls but you know, we have to stay vigilant because the stakes are so incredibly high. I know of at least one management company, and I will absolutely never say who, that lost a huge amount of business due to a data leak. And it was just like a standard phishing email. And, you know, the bottom line is that, you know, a little old ounce prevention. This is something that we can't recommend highly enough. And I hope that part of the overarching message of what we were talking about here today is that the avenue, the most efficient way to protect yourself from all the threats that are out there right now are to work with professionals that are taking their specialty in mind on your behalf. Whether, you know, it's working with a company like Sync, where they are taking this as seriously as they need to, so you don't have to worry as much about it. That if you follow the structures and you make sure that you keep your permissions in order, that your data is going to be safe. That if you work with an attorney like Javier, who's got an immense amount of experience and really understands the perils that you face, that your boards, your company can help get protected from something like that happening. And that if you work with VIVE, I'm just the guy who talks, but having someone like Elisa on our team is something that really sets us apart. We're not just here to serve a function for you, nor is Sync, nor is Javier. What we're here to do is be your partners. We concentrate on these little things. So that is one little thing that you don't have to worry about. The environment in which we're all running our businesses is more fraught than ever. Well, I think that most management companies are probably coming off the 2 or 3 best years in their business history, which certainly is great. And it's a large part of the reason that everyone's selling. The idea is that in return for all of that additional revenue, we've also taken on a lot more risk. And so what we would like to do is, as the professionals, the business partners that you work with, is help alleviate some of those concerns for you. We hope that, first of all, in our prepared remarks, we brought up some things that you hadn't thought about, but also that you take the opportunity. Thank you, Kim, for bringing up the slide with our contact information. Javier, sorry, that's my bad that I didn't get your contact information on there, but we can absolutely get you in touch with Javier. But please reach out to us. At VIVE, I'd love to give you a demo and show you what our service can do for you. But more importantly, we're resources that can help you in a lot of different ways. And what I'll do now is I'll kick it over to Kim, because I'm sure that I hope there are some questions that have come up during this, and we'd like to give you the opportunity to ask anything that's on your mind.
Sure. So one question that we got earlier, and I'm just going to open this to the whole panel, is, we talked a lot about ways to mitigate risk and ways to that you can showcase your security and your level of risk that you mitigate within your management company. How do you communicate, or how can management companies communicate what they do to mitigate risk to their boards? And why do you believe that this is an important conversation to have, whether it be with a current client or a prospective board?
Who wants to tackle that one? Javier?
Yeah, I think that, I think it's a conversation with the board and just, explaining that, they're business partners. We're in this together, and rising tide lifts all boats. And if, management is working with vendors that they're vetting, and if they've got tight practices, I think that's something, that everybody can appreciate. And I can appreciate that because, that product that you were talking about with, using the testing, the emails, we use that too. You know why? Because we got hit a couple of times and we got tired of it. And, the last thing, any management company wants to do is to be known as, oh, that's the company that's always getting hacked. Nobody's going to feel secure that way. So I think it's a great conversation to have.
And something that I saw in the questions, and it pertains specifically to us. And Jose, I'd love to talk to you offline about our stuff. In fact, I'll get your information if you don't mind, and I'll reach out to you. But just to speak generally, one of the objections that we face as management professionals in almost every walk of life is, we've been doing it this way for fill in the number of years. Why change now? And, there are a lot of ways that conversation can go. And part of the reason that I am now on the sales side of things is that I got tired of saying the same thing over and over again, which is, why on earth do you believe that progress stopped when you made up your mind about how it is to do something? I don't believe in term limits as a general rule, but one of the best arguments for term limits on association boards is that we really need to end the idea of people being on a board for 10 plus years, because they're way more inflexible in their thinking when they are presented with new challenges. And, like, everything has changed in our world. I argue mostly for the worse. But whatever ideas you had about pool safety got completely changed during COVID-19. Whether or not it was an overreaction, everybody had to take that into account. Whatever constructs you had in mind about how you wanted to govern your association went out the window the second that we had a pandemic that would have an influence on how we wanted to treat common areas. That is not something we had to contemplate in this country since the Spanish flu, which Don brought up. We live in unprecedented times, and I think one of the best roles that a responsible management company can play is really not letting boards off the hook when they want to be stubborn and stay where they're at. And the question pertained to hiring a vendor compliance company. There's a cost involved for the vendors. We're not going to run away from that because we don't charge management companies, we don't charge associations. But associations will sometimes push back and say, I don't understand, why do we need this now? This vendor has been fine for all of these years. And that is the type of thinking that causes people to get sued. Because what ends up happening is, first of all, what do they say on every financial services commercial? Past results do not indicate future performance. Just because something has been working for 10 years or a vendor has been error-free or properly insured for the last 10 years doesn't mean that they are right now. And more importantly, and what I like to bring up as an example of the way things go is that those vendors that you are so loyal to, and you should be, they are the bedrock of a responsible management company. When gas prices went up 10 years ago, when we hit that huge spike, fuel surcharges showed up on all those invoices. It was because, vendors were now facing an expense that they had not contemplated at the time of putting that contract in place for whatever services they were providing your association. But they were going to pass that cost on because there was an understanding that they were going to make a certain amount of profit doing this. And it's really no different than this. The insurance situation has gone crazy. This is probably the first webinar that I've done in 3 years. It's not just talking about how out of control insurance policies are for HOAs and condos. What do we do about it? Well, the bottom line is that's only going to get worse. The natural disasters that kicked off this huge expansion or this huge increase in premiums and frankly, a contraction of our HOA market. We have fewer than half of the HOA and condo underwriters in the market than we did 6 years ago. And that's because of Hurricane Harvey. That's because of the wildfires in California and the Pacific Northwest. That's going to be because of Surfside, because that's all hitting the same nationwide risk pool. And so we have to expect that those are going to increase. So the idea that we are going to continue behaving as if it was 15 years ago is crazy, because we used to have comically low commercial policy rates for HOAs and condos, and now we're among the higher, the seen as a riskier body than we used to be. Well, that also then means that people have to take their loss runs far more seriously. Before I got involved with VIVE, I was working as a consultant, and I helped an association move to self-insurance. They had to pass a special assessment because they had 4 items on their loss run. The board had not been particularly good. They had not listened to people like Javier, and they kept picking fights that they had no business being in. They had 4 lawsuits filed against them, and they became uninsurable. There was no policy that was going to take them at any cost, and even if there had been a cost, it would have been too high for it to make financial sense. It is an existential threat that our clients are facing these days, and they call for new programs and new ways of approaching things. And whether it's VIVE, whether it's Sync, whether it's bringing on a new attorney, one that takes stuff a little more seriously, who is focusing on working with your boards, these are the steps that people have to take, and there is a cost associated with it. The only thing that we will say is that the cost of engaging us up front is a heck of a lot less than the cost of whatever consequences are downstream from not exercising maximum risk management.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connor. And thank you for taking on the lead when you were like, "Ooh, I don't want to hear this voice anymore."
I was there the week after Orlando. I sounded exactly like you did. Yeah. And so I completely understand. Thank you for soldiering on. We do appreciate it.
Of course. No worries. All right, so we have actually answered all the questions that came through, and we are at time. So I just want to take a moment to thank again our incredible panel of experts in this industry. Thank you to all of you who came to today's webinar. Be on the lookout later this evening for a recording. And if you need to get in touch with us to answer any other questions, please do so. But thank you again for coming today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.